One's ready. Go!
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. It's me, it's Peaches. You know us. We brought on our great friend, Drew Outstanding. Go follow him over on X at Drew Outstanding. He is awesome. He's got a story that you were just absolutely not going to believe. I don't know if you guys remember, but there was this whole thing called COVID, and then the DOD did this thing called a vaccine mandate. We were told that it was safe and effective. Well, Drew Outstanding has a little bit of a different experience with that whole thing, considering that a day after he got the vaccine, he was completely paralyzed and ended up going into a medically induced coma with Guillain-Barré syndrome, and then he spent another 6 months completely paralyzed inside of the VA. But that's not even the most interesting part of his story. This guy has come all the way back. He's doing extreme sports now. He's on the speaking tour, and his main goal is to make sure that we don't forget all of these terrible things that happened. Drew is an awesome dude. Met him personally out here in Vegas, and we talked, and I was like, hey, we got to get you on the podcast immediately. And this one absolutely crushes it. But before we get into that, Jared, are there any of our partners you want to talk about real quickly?
Actually, there's a couple of them. So if you guys head over to onesready.com and then move to the right-hand side where it says prep and then scroll down to partner discounts, we've got all of our partners on there. And I want to highlight two in particular. One is Tackleate. You can click on any of the, like we used to sell it all on our website, but then it got a little clunky and it was difficult, and we're just not IT experts, so we kind of messed things up. And so to make it easier on us and you guys, if you go to our site and you click on any of these links that are kind of highlighted, it'll take you straight to a Tackleate. I'll just do it right now, and then I'll show you guys what actually happens. It takes you to a Tackleate site. Look at that. 10%. Redeem your code, and there's a code right there, and that'll get yourself a discount. So actually, you can't see it because it popped up on a different window. How about that? So when I said that we suck at IT, that's an example of it. Jeez. Yeah.
You're doing great, buddy. You're doing great.
So the other one is Modern Athlete Strength Systems. Also, the links there. They have two different programs right now, but I'll mention the third here in a second. But they've got Warfighter and Warfighter Elite. If you click on the pictures, that'll take you to that site through Train Heroic. You use the promo code ONESREADY to get yourself a discount. Also, they have the 90-day Unchained, which is a one-on-one 90 days of intense dieting. So diet, nutrition, strength and conditioning, and just kind of life coaching stuff. There's no promo code for that, but if you let them know during your intake interview that we sent you, they'll get you a discount on that as well. So, yeah, enjoy this next episode. It was a great talk, and man, he's without a doubt, he has been through some shit.
Crazy. This guy, I just can't believe it, man. Like, to hear him talk and to hear how positive he is and to hear that he's still motivated to get this stuff done. And he doesn't do it from a place of like hate or anger or rage. He does it from a place of positivity where he wants to help other people. He's got a great network of folks that are all talking about this stuff. Can't wait for you guys to hear this one. It was awesome. So appreciate you. And if you guys want to get any of those links, if you want to see everywhere we are, just go to the Instagram and hit the link tree. We got a link tree for you, or go to the link tree website and you'll see literally everything we do, to include a little, if you want a little Magic Mike making screen grid squares disappear shirt, you can find one there. Peaches got it on that barrel chest of his. So appreciate you. This episode is awesome. Thanks for following everything we do. We're here for you. Without further ado, Drew Outstanding. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. It's me, it's Jared. It's our good friend, Drew Outstanding. You can find him over at X at Drew Outstanding. Listen, I don't even want to do a whole big preamble to this. I just want to kind of like get into it because, Drew, you got an amazing story. You were kind enough to spend some of your time with me out here in Vegas. And I got to be honest, I don't know what blew me away more, those sizzling fajitas that they brought out to tableside, or really the entire story of your background. So why don't we just start there? I'm not going to lead into it a whole lot. You were in the military, so take us all the way back and get us to the start of your military career, and I guess we'll go from there.
Yeah, no, that was an amazing restaurant. Yeah, those fajitas were good. It was a good time talking to you, catching up. You know, that's my favorite thing. I mean, just to start off, I love traveling. It's kind of part of why I joined the military, is to just kind of get out there, learn about people's cultures, their backgrounds, figure out how I can, make a difference. When I joined the Army at 19 years old, I was, I think, 130 pounds soaking wet. And I'm like, and it was right, not too long after 9/11. So it's like, there's got to be a way that, I can, add value, be a net positive, make a difference. I wasn't thinking like that at the time, but it was just like, what can I do? I'm just sitting here in my small town in Minnesota, and I was working at Applebee's, and and I'm like, there's got to be something more. I was staying up all night, and it's like there's got to be a lot better out there. So I jumped on, joined the Army, and before I know it, I was at Fort Benning, Georgia, for basic, AIT in Alabama, Fort Rucker. So doing the aviation thing. Go to my first unit, and they're like, hey, we're now attached to Third ID, and they're going to Iraq, and so we're going to join them. We're going to hop in. So go jump on the range. Everyone's at the range right now. So it's like, okay, I guess this is what's going. And that kind of just jump started my life to jump in 2 feet in, head first in, belly flop, whatever it is, and figure out along the way.
Well, and you didn't really have many options, right? Like, you knew you were going to Iraq and you couldn't get out of it. Some would say you were between a rock and a hard place.
And Rock of the Marne, Third ID is our saying there.
I love it. So as you were spinning up, getting ready for that deployment, man, I mean, it was pretty quick. Like, you got in and then suddenly you had these orders and you were going, to Iraq and figuring that out. What time frame did you actually deploy to Iraq?
January 2005. So yeah, okay. It was 6 months before or after I got to the unit, and something like 9 months after I enlisted.
Well, and for people that people that weren't tracking Iraq at that time, it was a literal shit show. It was just an absolute dumpster fire, especially when you talk about the Tikrit Triangle, when you talk about around Baghdad, up to
Balad, Sadr City, Fallujah. Yeah.
All that stuff was going absolutely insane at that time. So as you hit the ground in Iraq, that wasn't even, 6 months after you got in. So you went from Applebee's slinging 2 for $20 appetizers. And then now here you are in Iraq, in Sadr City, and bouncing around and doing the job. What was that like?
Okay. Iraq. Yep. 2005 is basically the whole year of that. I got thrown into it, and I didn't know any different, but it all went pretty well from what I could tell. I mean, I was junior enlisted, private first class. I think I got promoted to specialist while I was in Iraq. Yeah, actually on Halloween. I think they did promotions once a month, and mine landed on the end of the month, Halloween. And so that was pretty cool. But no, I had amazing leadership. It seemed like they took care of us pretty well. And I learned a lot really quick. And then I was doing air assault stuff. I wasn't air assault, but I was bouncing around in the helicopter to different places throughout Iraq, and Black Hawk unit, working with a different task force. Our unit was actually the one that was transporting Saddam Hussein and his people to trial during that time. So it was a lot of crazy. We were working with special forces of Army and different units, and I don't even know all the people that we're connected to in the task force during that time. But no, it was intense. But I just learned from my leadership along the way. You hear a lot of like bad things about officers, but like in aviation, at least all of my experiences with officers were amazing. But then later I could understand. You get field arms, unit with that company commander that might not fit with the rest of people. I learned that there's different, everyone has their different story, but no, it went really well. It was pretty crazy, but that year made me grow up pretty fast.
Yeah. And you said that you were 19 when you came in, and then you got, and you went on and you deployed 6 months after getting to the unit and that kind of stuff. And then you're talking about Third ID and all the kind of different organizations and JTFs you work with and stuff like that. But is it just me, or do you remember all those organizations? Because that is one of the things that I hate about me being so young and just going like, whatever, I don't care, I just want to do the mission, is because I actually don't remember or don't even know who I've worked with when I was a younger dude. All these great people, great organizations, and granted, it's a lot easier to keep in contact with people now, right?
Yeah.
But then it was just like, okay, well, I'll probably.
It was different. It was 20 years ago. Technology was a lot different. It was, phone, pretty much, and phone cards, AT&T, those phone cards and those.
Hell yeah,
and
brother!
stuff like that.
I made a lot of calls off a stack for we were very privileged, Peaches and I, when we would leave, like we would have like a little pre-deployment party, and almost every single time the chaplain would walk in with a stack of this, and it would be phone cards, and he would just be like, where are you going? Okay, here's your stack of like 40, here's whatever. And then you had to know how to dial. And, for Peaches and I sitting behind the magical curtain that makes us special, you'd have to dial like 700 numbers to get to a line to where you could enter the fight. You're scratching off phone cards and some random wooden MWR somewhere. It was just a different time.
Yeah, it was. And it was crazy. It was like, you had to dial all those codes to get in. And then the person actually had to, if you're calling back home, that's what, 8-9 hours ahead or whatever the difference was. And you're hoping that they're awake. Luckily, I was on night shift. I tried to be on night shift as much as possible. And so I figured out a way to do it. But yeah, no, to your question, it's like, yeah, I blank on, everyone I worked with, because you just get thrown into it. And you have these conversations later, and you don't want to say the wrong thing, but it's like, yep, I know an idea of who I worked with and stuff. I'm not going to go way into stuff. Right. And then it's the whole, classified, unclassified. Should I talk about this? Should I not? But I just started talking about the people, and there's that quote. It's like, people may not remember what you say or what you do, but they'll remember how you made them feel. Yep. That type of thing. And there was this one Special Forces Army guy, and you couldn't tell that he was Special Forces or even Army or whatever, big guy, big belly and stuff like that. But he could pop into anywhere around the world and just fit in. But then when he had to operate, he was just the most professional ever. And so it's like, I just sat down and like learned as much as I can from a lot of these guys. And it was crazy. They could just turn it off and just have a conversation with anybody. And then they turn it on and it's go time. It's like the Black Hawk Down type of stuff. Going back to the original question, I saw Black Hawk Down a couple of years before that, and I'm like, wow, that was one of those movies where it's like you walk out and like that wasn't a happy ending. Like you walk out of there and you're just silent, and that's kind of where I kind of grew up. It's like, okay, that's it's a little bit more how the world works.
Yeah, and that's to go into Black Hawk Down, that is probably I don't even know. I wouldn't even say behind. Saving Private Ryan or something like that. I'd say it's equal to, and the reason because it's modern warfare, but because, I mean, one, what a phenomenal cast they had. They had some big ass names in there. Two is a lot of the fighting was so accurate, and you're like, dude, this is incredible. And you're right. There was no happy ending. And then when you had like the one scene that really just always gets me is when the one Ranger that had just come back from the convoy, and then they're going back. I actually, maybe he wasn't Ranger, maybe he was infantry dude, but the convoy had just come back. They had just gotten done through a whole bunch of hail of shit, and then the option is to go back out, and he's like, nah man, I can't, and then his troop commander's in the driver's seat, like looking in the rear view mirror, just like, hey man, are you sure you don't want to come? Like, I get it, but you're going to regret this for the rest of your life. And then he ends up getting back in. But like, I think being able to capture that kind of stuff is powerful. And this is not a movie monologue or anything like that. It's just, it's one of those things where just, man, you can relate to it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys know you get to ask that question of like, why'd you join, or why, how was your experience, stuff like that. It's like, how can I even put that into like a sentence or two, so it's
you some kind of war junkie, Drew.
Yeah. Eric Bana. Oh man. I go back and watch that movie, and of course it's, it's movie magic. It's, you have to capture that whole experience in a 2-hour film and stuff like that. And it's never going to be exactly the same, but it's like, man, you can pick out, the ones that did their homework and talk to, consultants or people that were in and stuff like that. Eric Bana is awesome. Tom Sizemore, all these guys, Josh Hartnett. So yeah, it's,
Phil Dunphy played Tim Wilkinson in that movie, by the way. Like, if you Modern Family later, I started watching Modern Family. I'm like, where do I recognize this guy from? And then I'll rewatch. I'm one of those guys that like, I'll just get it into my head and be like, oh, I'm going to rewatch this movie. I don't watch a lot of new movies, but I threw on Black Hawk Down and I was like, oh God, Phil Dunphy is playing Tim Wilkinson right now. That's why I recognize this SOB. Black Hawk Down was one of those first movies, and you had a great read of this. It was the first one where, American folks watching that, they're like, wait a second, we don't win everything that we ever do, and there's like actual prices that these guys had to pay. It's crazy. And just a quick note on Hoot and the War Junkie comment. I had the distinct privilege of working with one of the Army Tier 1 operators. He was a contracted instructor down at the schoolhouse when I worked there. He's got 18 deployments. He ended up making Sergeant Major up at that unit. He's actually an honorary PJ. So there's a program where you can nominate a guy and you'll give him a beret, and he's an honorary PJ. So he is one. So shout out to Diori. But he was actually mentored. So Hoot was a conglomeration of characters. It was 2 or 3 different real people that they put into one for the movie. And it was one of his mentors. And he verified for me that, no kidding, "this is my safety, sir," that was a real comment that he really did in front of people. That's why they put it in the movie. It was pretty badass. So coming back from Iraq, man, that had to have changed you as you reintegrated and got ready for your further career in the Army. There was a ton of lessons and a ton of changes that you had, but how did that inform your path forward working in the Army after you got back? And it sounds like 2006, because it sounds like the whole year of 2005 you spent there.
Yep, the whole year 2005, 2006. Because I was my orders were to go to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and then the name or the location, I didn't know how to read orders at the time, so I'm like, this looks goofy. Then everybody else has said 4-3 aviation, not 101 and all this stuff like that. But yeah, like I said, to get there, and they're like, yeah, we got reassigned to 3rd ID, so we go back to Fort Campbell, and then that's when they left. Like, they left to go to Iraq and some other place. So we're back in Fort Campbell, this whole, one of the biggest installations, and it's a ghost town. So we out-processed there for a couple months, and then we all beeline down to Savannah, Georgia. So, it's Fort Stewart is the larger 3rd ID, and then Hunter Army Airfield. You guys might know that. It's a kind of a little tiny conglomerate of different branches and stuff like that. Which
I jumped it, homie. I got jumps on Hunter Army Airfield, but those beautiful cotton fields, they're nice and soft, except when you land on the runway next to it with your good friend old Brune Peaches. Brune and I.
Go ahead.
Oh no, we just absolutely fun story about Hunter Army Airfield. We're jumping. My friend Elliot's a new jump. He wasn't a new jump master. He was qualified, but it was like his first go out of a 47. We were jumping with the 160th dudes. Oh, yeah. Hilarious, because like classic JM stuff. He looks up, lights red. The second that he turned, and we all see it, we're all hooked up on static line. We all see him look, and then as soon as he looks down to spot again, the light turns green, and we were like, oh no. And then like we're looking, and like he's doing this extended spot, and we're like, oh, this is too long. We're gonna run into red light here. And he looks up and he sees the light, and he's like, oh, okay. And then he kind of like stands up casually, and he's like, follow me, and he jumps out, and Bruner and I were at the end of this stick, and we were like, oh no. I would never jump on a red light. But it might have been pink as I was leaving the ramp, and I think I was either last or second to last because we were the heaviest dudes. And as I'm leaving, I'm like, this isn't going to be good. And then under my static line, there's this huge, beautiful plowed cotton field. We knew it was going to be nice and easy to land on. It was like spring, so it was soft. And then as I see that just fade from where I'm going to impact, I just see that we're tracking directly, and there's no steering. I'm into the wind. It's like 200 feet under a static line. And I'm like, here we go. And Bruner and I just absolutely crack this runway. And me and the PJ medical dork, I hit the ground harder than I've ever hit it. Like if I had that jump at like static line airborne school, I'd have just quit. I'd have been like, nah, this is not for me. But like I roll over, literally still in my chute, and I knew that Bruner, like I watched him hit the runway too. And I look and I'm like, dude, are you okay? And he's like, yeah. And then later he comes to me and was like, hey man, I want to say, thanks for checking on me. He was like, I'll be honest with you. You didn't sound like you were okay. I was like,
isn't that how it goes? It's like
we're
checking on each other, but it's also kind of a check on ourselves too. It's like, oh, maybe am I okay? Are you okay?
Can I talk?
How bad are we? Yeah, how bad? Are we really bad, or can we get over this? Actually, or is it a little life lesson you gotta learn? Yeah. But yeah, Hunter was great. Like in retrospect, I'm like, that was my best duty station. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else, but. No, it was amazing. Yeah, Tybee Island was amazing. It was like 20 miles away from the coast, and then the River Street right there. So it's something like River Street, Conger Street, and Broad Street, and on those 3 streets you can drink outside. So it was like inside you have these fancy glasses and everything like that. And then as you walk out the door, they're like, oh yeah, just pour the glass into a plastic cup and then go have a good time. And yeah, it was amazing. Especially, had just turned 21 right after deployment. So, or in Iraq. So the next month
good.
out,
Best
good time.
scenario.
A lot of life lessons. USAA gave me a $5,000 credit card limit or something like that, and I'm like, I guess I'll spend this. And so I learned the hard way about finances. At 21 years old, and good time. So I spent another couple years down there, and then I'm just like, what do I do with my life now? The doors were opening, the opportunities. Like I said, I learned a lot from senior enlisted officers, aviation guys, jump guys, everything. I'm like, wow, I had no idea. And this is what I think civilians kind of don't understand is like they think you join the military, you join the Army, Air Force, you're just flying, and Army, you're just in the mud shooting and stuff like that. And it's so much more than that, and you could do all these amazing things. So my crazy trajectory, it's like, oh, that's possible. I want to try to go for that, and whatever the thing is. So I got out. I'm like, I want to go get an education because I couldn't afford it before. I didn't know what it would, if I could even do that. I grew up, lower class than, people like Kamala Harris and stuff like that or whatever. It's like, okay,
here, bro.
Grew up middle class. I'm like, I think I was lower middle than you. And so, went to college, went back to home to Minnesota. I went to Mankato, Minnesota State, got a degree in law enforcement there. I knew I didn't want to do local law enforcement, but I'm like, wow, maybe DEA, U.S. Marshals, something like that. So I took this option 2 for federal. And then I need to take a minor. So I'm like, okay, military science. I didn't know what to pick. And there they started to require like speaking, public speaking, nonverbal communication, all these things like that. I'm like, wow, I'm getting A's in these classes. I'm enjoying it. And they're like, hey, why don't you do a communications degree or something like that? I'm like, maybe not yet, but I just started going down that path. So I kind of just fell into more speaking roles. I did security for a while, high-rise building, private security, that kind of stuff. I'm just really trying to find my place, but I still wanted to serve. So I went back in, but stayed local with the Minnesota National Guard and spent another 12 or so years there.
Yeah. So you felt that calling to come back to the Army and come back to the National Guard. What was the transition from, active duty, big Army into National Guard like for you? Was it everything that you'd hoped for, or why did you get back into the National Guard?
Yeah, I want to stay local. I had aging, medically issued parents, I guess. So I wanted to stay close to them. And it was different. It wasn't as bad as active duty said it was, and stuff like that. So I've seen both sides, and it was cool because, you go and you do your time there. It turned out to be more than 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer. That's just a slogan. It turns out to be a lot more than that, especially if you want to rank up or go to different schools and stuff like that, which that was my thing. But then I'm also working on the civilian side, like I said, security, account management, turned into sales, finance, and it just kept developing skills there. So had to keep that balance. So, I mean, I don't know if they call it overachiever. I just want to achieve more and more things and just kind of level up. So I liked it. I like that balance. Sometimes you got too much, but then I knew when to kind of walk it back. And that's why nowadays I like doing my own thing. I can make my own schedule. Some days if I'm able to and have the energy, I can work a 16-hour day. I've done it before. Don't want to do it every day, but if it's what I want to do, doing speaking engagements, event planning, going to conventions, doing interviews, that's awesome. Especially if I can, kind of create a legacy. We've talked about our air and our families and stuff like that, where it's like, it'd be cool to make something. I've never been that guy that just wants to go and clock in and clock out, and then that's it. And then, wait, see what the next day happens. But yeah, I kept a pretty good balance.
Yeah. And then we're going to fast forward a little bit, and we're going to get to the heart of this story. So late in 2019, we started to get word that there was this weird virus and it was coming out of Wuhan. And the initial reports were that a bat made out with a pangolin, and then a pangolin kissed a turtle in a wet lab. And we started getting word of this whole COVID thing, and that it just absolutely turned the entire world upside down and on its head. And from that, overreaction to what we know now, hindsight is 2020, and we know what that whole thing was. But really what started happening here is the vaccine mandate, and we started talking about vaccines. Tell me about how, you felt kind of at the beginning of that one. I know for Peaches and I, we were actually together and, talking and on the podcast and stuff. So we actually lived this whole thing together as two dudes, just as two good bros that have a long lasting and public bromance. But for you, as that stuff started going, so you're in the National Guard, typically stuff is a little bit more lax there, but as this thing started taking shape, what were your feelings on it, and how did you feel about being kind of in at that point?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Going back to like the whole lax National Guard thing is Minnesota is one of the, and somebody can correct me if they want to, but from what I hear, Minnesota gets pulled to do deployments more than any other National Guard. I think Texas is up there too, just because I don't know. I don't know why they do that, but yeah, pretty much you can plan on every 3 years you're getting deployed. And when I say deployment, you're probably going to Kuwait and then going from there, popping into Iraq, Afghanistan at the time. So this was 2018 to 2019. I got pulled for a division deployment for that, and where that one is more chill. I say chill. I guess maybe less in the mud than the 2005 one. So I was more of a liaison. We were in Arifjan, but then, yeah, I'm bouncing around to UAE, Jordan, Bahrain, all those different places. And it was cool. It was a different side. I was able to give, briefs to a two-star general every 3 days. And it was a wild ride. So yeah, 2018, 2019, I get back, I go to another leadership school, and that's when everything kind of went down. Like you said, we're getting word of all this stuff. 2020 happens, and I could see the writing on the wall with the stuff. The George Floyd stuff starts popping off. I'm like, okay, like this is I can see the writing on the wall, kind of where things are going. And so I got word from my unit. They're like, hey, anybody that want to come and participate and figure out what's going on? And I could tell we were going to get, activated. So I'm like, whatever, I don't got a lot going on right now, put me in. Cause I could tell, it was kind of coming down. And so I go through all the processing, and they're like, yep, here's your orders now, and just kind of be ready. And then the next day happened, like it got more fiery, and, what was the word? Just like peaceful yet fiery, or all that kind of stuff. And yep. So it turned into just a deployment operation in the middle of Minneapolis. So we were using our Blackhawks to, we use this dunk training and stuff like that, where it's like we pick up a bucket of water, go to a river, pick up a bucket of water, bring it over, put out wildfires. We did it a lot in like California, Oregon, and stuff like that around that time. And then the guys are like, hey, how about if they're setting cars on fire and stuff like that. And they came up with the idea. I was in the room at the time, and they're like, how about we use our bucket training to dump it on the cars in Minneapolis? And so nobody would ever thought about that before this, and that we got the go ahead, and yeah, we're putting out fires and everything. So that was wild. And this was in the heart of COVID. And so we, all of us thought like, okay, we're definitely getting COVID, and we're going to get tested. And, they're talking about getting tested and stuff like that, because we're all sleeping in these big hangars all together, 600 people, 24-hour operations. And then at the end of it, none of us had COVID, at least everyone I knew of all the people there. I'm like, okay, that's weird. That's kind of different than what all the news is saying. So anyways, yeah, and then forward, going into 2021, then they started doing the mandates and stuff like that, and it kind of get a little shaky.
Yeah. I mean, you put 600 people in anywhere, and usually you're going to have some crud. You got that deployment crud as soon as you get over there, no matter where you end up going. You're like, oh, okay. Well, I'm sure it has nothing to do with the 300 people on different airplanes in airports that I crossed paths with. So the fact that you guys didn't get sick in a 600 person hangar is pretty impressive. But so when we start talking about the mandate, like how did that kind of take a turn for you?
Yep. And so, yeah, that's coming that next year, that 2021 time. And yep, they're all saying, hey, you gotta go get this. And some people, some units, some commanders, they're pushing it more than others. And then, all of us, we went through base training, got the, 10 shots in a row and stuff like that. And then, the peanut butter one in the cheek. and they got to rub it around and on top of everything else. And then each deployment, we had to get all these vaccines. So I thought it was just kind of normal, and we had to get the flu thing all the time. Do you remember getting the flu in the nose deal
Yep.
for a while?
Nasal spray.
Yep. And so I didn't know any better. And then, the media's saying, hey, get this and be able to take off the mask because they're, everywhere you had to have the mask during that time. And then just the whole thing. It stops contagion, stops transmission. And then later all these, turn into lies. So I get the thing that they're like, go to the VA, they'll take care of you. I go in, it's like everything's blocked off and tape and looks like outbreak and stuff like that. So it's in an atrium and it doesn't feel very medical at all. So they go, hey, take this, go sit over there. And then if anything happens in 15 minutes, let us know. Otherwise, get the F out. It's like, all right. So I go and do that, get the flu-like symptoms like they say is probably going to happen that day. So I get that. Turns into numbness and tingling. In retrospect, I look at like all my symptoms now and it looks kind of crazy. At the time, it's like I'm stressed out. I'm working a sales job and I'm in the National Guard. I just had an infant child to take care of and all these things. I felt, weird body things before. I'm like, whatever, it's just stress. But yeah, it's numbness, tingling in my fingers, my toes. That kind of adds up. Then I can't pick up like, a phone, a glass of water, without kind of putting a lot after, like I'm picking up a 50-pound, dumbbell. And I'm like, all right, that's getting kind of weird.
Yeah, that's
so
odd.
I go to sleep, wake up the next day, and I can't move anything. I can't move my trunk, my core, my legs. I barely had moving my fingers, which was tough, and then my toes. So I get drug out. Quickly go to the bathroom, and when I say go to the bathroom, I plop on the toilet and just dead weight, and it's like, get me to the hospital now, like call medevac. If I could call a helicopter to come get me, that would be awesome. Bro, it almost turned into that.
How terrifying was that for you? That had to be one of the scariest things ever.
I thought it was COVID. I mean, the way everybody was talking about, it's like, and I called my boss I messaged my boss, and I had professors. I was in grad school at the time. I'm like, hey, I'm going to the hospital just to let you know. I know I have all these proposals and meetings and all this stuff, but I'm on my way to the hospital. I need to figure out what this is. Maybe COVID. I don't know, but it's pretty serious. And then my boss, and she's like, yeah, just go take care of yourself. And then they run all these tests, blood work, MRI, CAT scan, everything comes back negative. It looks like I'm just a healthy person. Obviously they can see that I'm not. They're like, but we've seen this before. It's Guillain-Barré syndrome, GBS, also known as the French polio. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm healthy, or I would be healthy other than today. And so, there's a little bit more. That's what I that picture with my, in uniform, that was about 6 months before this all happened. And so they're like, well, we got to do a lumbar puncture, a spinal tap to get the evidence. So I'm like, fuck, okay, fine, do it. And then they do it, and they're like, yep. And now we have to go to the neurological ICU, get to a bigger hospital that can do more stuff. And that's where everything took a turn. And they're like, we need to put you into a coma. We have to do plasmapheresis, IVIG. I didn't even know what those names or words were at the time. I'm like, whatever, just save me,
Right.
I've never even heard, like, maybe it's just because I'm not in the medical career field or anything like that, but I've never even heard of that.
Either have I. It's rare, but it's caused by a viral or bacteria infection, I found out. And doctor's like, oh, it could be caused from anything, or a viral load that I just received a week later.
Or an experimental mRNA vaccine that was never tested, and it was funded and then produced for America in the fastest time ever with no double-blind or placebo studies. The second that we were talking about this at lunch, and as you were kind of going through this, I was like, dude, did you get Guillain-Barré? Did you and you were like, yep, right away. And I knew that for two reasons. One, because I'm a medical nerd. I like to consider myself a medical super nerd. But number two is because I remember being censored on the internet for looking at this thing and going, holy crap, this is a real and possible danger of this thing. And you weren't allowed to talk about it. Like at that time, 2020, 2021, there were a lot of people out there that were censored by big tech for talking about all this stuff. And you couldn't even get the information out there. But it was plainly apparent to folks. We're like, hey, this is a real issue. So when I heard your story, we actually had a good friend of ours that deployed with us. We were in Africa during a lot of the height of this stuff. We were somewhere on that dark continent. And one of my friends came to me and he was like, hey, man, I know this thing is coming, pretty hot and heavy. I know they're really pushing us to get it, but I got to tell you, my sister-in-law right now is in the hospital. She completely lost the ability to control like the left side of her face, and it never came back. Like, fast forward, he was like, she's in there dealing with it right now, but she ended up having paralysis for the same thing. As you were going through that, you just said you got put into a coma. How long were you in a medically induced coma?
Yeah, about a week or 10, I think 10 days is what it turned up to. I really have to go back and look at my reports and all this stuff. But yeah, about a week. I call it 7 days. It felt like 7 years because it turned into this. And we could talk about this for 4 hours or something like that if you want to later. But it felt like a dream, a video game. I knew it wasn't reality, but I couldn't wake up from it like it was a normal dream. Like normal dream, yep, okay, do this thing, wake up, and we're back in normal life. But there was a ceiling. I couldn't get out of it. It was crazy. So I'm like, I might as well just enjoy this roller coaster, this amusement park that I'm on right now. It actually felt better than the paralyzed, crazy body that I was in before going into it. So it's like, all right, let's see what happens. But yeah, it was a wild ride, and I try to put it. It was like a torch. It was like different things, like they say, your life flashes between your eyes when you go through something, you're a near-death experience. So it's kind of like that, where I'm reliving different moments. It feels like the movies, the quotes. There was some Batman stuff in there, and it's like, all right, this is wild. And then, but at the same time, it felt like torture too. So they were performing these things, these plasmapheresis, IVIG, intravenous immunoglobulin transfer. So it's like they took out all the bad stuff. Yeah, going back to Guillain-Barré syndrome, basically it tricks your immune system. So the viral infection comes into your body, tricks your immune system to thinking your body's the enemy and starts ripping apart nerves. So it rips apart the myelin sheath, the protective coating around the nerves, puts you into paralysis. But then it goes after muscles, organs. So it was going after my heart, lungs, brain, all the important stuff. And so they had to do the procedures before it would take me out. So, but when they're doing that stuff, I'm hooked up to all these things. I got a breathing tube, a food tube, everything you saw in that picture, just every tube and hole you could think of. And so they're doing that stuff in the coma. I'm feeling like I'm being tortured, I've never been waterboarded or anything like that, but just think about that. But it just felt like I was stuck in a chair and I couldn't move while everybody else around was having the time of their life, moving around, and I'm stuck. And maybe that was a foreshadowing to be into a chair, a manual wheelchair later on. But yeah, this is I had a local videographer make this whole thing. He interviewed me, and then just to see what the first 12 months were like. And it was on YouTube. I put it on YouTube, so it's like, oh, maybe we can't talk about the how it happened, but we could talk about what happened, happened, and how my life was. But it was wild, and still trying to break down that whole experience.
Yeah.
Like I came out and I came fully paralyzed, and then I'm stuck in the VA, fully paralyzed for another 6 months, trying to get back. Each area of my body kind of opened up slowly, and then still have paralysis in my feet, hands, and yeah.
The man. All right, I try and put myself in this kind of situations and figure out what it would be like, and that sounds, I guess, terrifying or torturous. And you've even said torturous to be stuck in like a chair. Everything's going around you can't control it because you're in a coma. You're not dreaming. Do they? And I don't even know if this is an option. Will they give you the option to? I guess it's not an option because you can't say one way or the other, right? But can they put you on, I don't know, ketamine or something like that just to block that any kind of way? And maybe that's more of a question for Aaron, but like, I don't, like, I just thinking about this going.
Yeah, well, they had me on every drug that I thought was even possible when I was in. So they had me on fentanyl, on the opioids, everything, and it all had, well, the fentanyl was patches, so they had it on one arm. Then 3 days later they switched that. That lasted the whole 6 months while I was hospitalized. And I'm like, I've never been on all these drugs, and like, it's just an ibuprofen,
Yeah.
military candy was the biggest thing that I had before all this. And then but no, it was the oxy and stuff like that. And what they had to do, because I had a breathing tube and all the stuff, they had to crush it up and then put in a syringe, and then the syringe goes in directly into my stomach. And that was every 4 hours. I was getting all this medication in order to stop the pain, because the pain was unbearable. But I didn't know anything different. All I knew is I wanted to survive. And so people, we talk about, the whole veteran ending yourself and stuff like that. And that never, I want to say it never crossed my mind, because I just wanted to live. I wanted to get back. I'm like, I know I shouldn't be here, but I got to my worst. I got to the rock bottom. It happened when, probably in the middle of the hospitalization, I'm trying to get away from this tracheostomy, get out of the breathing tube, because what would happen is it would fill up with saliva throughout the day. And at that time, they need to like suction it out, like clear it out so it stays whatever, because otherwise I started to feel like I was drowning. So on that third shift, nursing watching me, 24 hours, I began to realize their shifts, 8-hour shifts and stuff like that. And the third shift was the worst, just because who wants to be on third shift as a rehab aid nurse? And so, and one of them didn't speak English very well. I'm like, I'm fucking drowning in my own saliva. Please help me, And so, yeah, terrifying, painful, but yeah, I just wanted to live and get back. Like I said, a lot of those videos were get back to my son, infant at the time. It really broke me when they said that, COVID policies are like, oh, you can't be in here, nobody under 13, stuff like that. They're like, well, you can have somebody bring them over to the window. You're on the first floor and you could do FaceTime and see your son. I'm like, when they said that, I wanted to throw that person out of the window, and I obviously couldn't because I couldn't move anything. But I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So that was my motivation
You're a pretty small dude too, so it would depend on how big. Those third shift nurses are typically pretty fat, so you can't really you can't pick them up.
I was gonna try. No, it was wild. So all that policies, they didn't make any sense. So going back to the whole thing of, doing what we're told, doing what we're ordered, but what if it's the wrong kind of order and it didn't make sense to what was going on? And like, let me know the information, the research behind what you're telling me to do with my own body, with my own, how I want to live and operate with my family and stuff like that. So I don't want anybody to forget all this stuff. And I don't want this to happen to anybody else. So you guys talk about, people have talked about, me being strong and motivating, stuff like that. And I'm like, thank you. I appreciate that. I don't know any other way. I just don't want this to happen to anybody else. So if my story that I share can get that to the point where if anything like this comes back around, please be aware of it, look at the things, and, stand up for yourself, your own body, your own family. When everyone's telling you have to go about this a certain way.
Yeah. And so kind of 2 points to that is, one is, I don't think when you're in a situation like you were in, you can kind of go, okay, I can see why somebody would take their own life. Like, holy shit, you're in that kind of amount of pain. And, I've worked with, I know one special mission unit dude that I worked with, that I was deployed with, who had a voluntary leg amputation because the pain was so chronic and so bad, and he dealt with it for years, that he's just like, dude, take it off. And the docs are like, and then he went to a specialist, and they were like, actually, because you're not an IED victim and we're able to actually do it, under a controlled environment without trauma, we can actually give you the best case. That dude was back to doing offsets with us. Like, we would do a 10K offset to a target. He was jumping. And so he essentially lived a normal life, but just to get away from that pain. The second point is, when people say that we could never go back to, like, how the hell did the Nazis come into power, and how did people do that? This was a prime example of that. When you have relatively intelligent people like nurses and medical folks then just go all in on this. And to your point, like, because we dealt with something as well, like my son ended up in the hospital, and not because of COVID or anything like that, but just ended up in the hospital. And me and my wife are there, and they're like, one of you got to pick. One of you gets to go in. And it's like, okay, well, obviously my wife, like, go for it. She managed to break down one of the nurses that actually had some common sense and go like, all right. And then the nurse came around back and snuck me in the back so that I could be there. So yes, it is easy. I mean, there were cops shutting down gyms, shutting down businesses,
chasing people down on the beach.
Right.
Someone is running.
They filled in skate parks with sand in California so you couldn't go outside. It was the absolute craziest thing on the face of the planet. You had commanders that would, and I know that you dealt with this, and SecDef Pete Hegseth recently came out and said, hey, the COVID mandate was an unlawful order, and good on him. I know people feel some way about Pete Hegseth at this point in time, but man, we had commanders. Peach and I had a commander that would openly lie on emails, and he would do exactly what you're not supposed to do. He would say, hey, listen, man, if your entire troop gets vaccinated, you guys don't have to wear your masks around here, and everybody else on base is doing it. And there was literally nobody. There was, me, I was a thorn in everybody's side during this thing, and Peaches had to deal with that as my supervisor and my chief at the time. But like, I was like, this is fucking retarded. What are we talking about? This is so stupid. Like, you guys have no clue what you're talking about. None of this makes sense. And the answer was like, well, this is what we're being ordered to do. And I know that you dealt with a lot of that resistance both beforehand. It's the only reason why you ended up, accepting the vaccination, right? Is they dangled you all these carrots to say, hey, if you do this, then we'll give you this benefit. That is the opposite of what you just talked about, medically informed consent and independent, management of your own medical profile. And that's one of the biggest things that I'm proud of you for talking about and not letting people forget. Like, I don't want to be super hyperbolic or super black-pilled here, but people died in the hospital on FaceTime with their children during this event.
Yeah, and it hasn't been walked back. And I when I was in the hospital afterwards, I come back as a vegetable, pretty much at home for another 6 months, not be able to do anything. And I just kept waiting to hear, accountability, apology, acknowledgement of, hey, I know we said, it'll stop contagion, but we were wrong, and it really hasn't been any of that. Yeah, you get trickles of these things of, articles coming out and, things about Pfizer or the UK suing this or removing the products, but those are a flash in the pan. You get a quick thing and be like, hey, maybe things are going to turn around, and then nothing. Or then the last couple of years with the campaigns, the election, the other geopolitical hotspots around the world start popping off, and it's like, hey, can we still figure out this this crazy thing 5 years ago that shut down the whole world, and not a lot has happened. So I'm still doing the fight, and I don't know how to do all this. I'm sure you guys didn't know how to do everything that you're doing now with all this stuff, but you figure it out along the way, and make connections, and it's going to be a tough road. And I just had to really realize that. And I talk with people, and they're like, oh yeah, I didn't get it, and I saw this coming a mile away, and I'm like, how? Who did you talk to? Who did you get this memo from that said, don't do this and do it because it was going to be this, and I'm like, okay, well, we all got to make our own choices. This is the one I did, and now I'm going about this knowing what I know now.
So what was your road to recovery like, man? Because, you were paralyzed, you 6 months at the VA, and feeling like you were drowning every night. So just terrifying nightmare scenario after nightmare scenario. And I'm sure fighting, with the VA to just get them to even acknowledge that they're the ones that injured you. People, it's like the third rail that you're not allowed to touch here. You can show them when this started. It started a day after you got this experimental vaccine, and it literally paralyzed you, caused you to have a medical retirement from the National Guard. But the road to recovery is something that I really want to lean into, because you said it. You got to your darkest point, but you had this unbelievable will to live for your son, for your family, for yourself. You fought. to get back to where you are now? And we'll talk about your involvement in some of these extreme sports that you're checking out and doing everything that you can. But as your road to recovery was happening, how did that give you the energy to keep going? Was it like every time that you got a new sensation or a new feeling or an ability to move a body part, how did that fuel you to keep going?
Yeah, I was watching documentaries a lot before this happened of all different kind of stuff, and then so when I was in the hospital, luckily, I had an internet connection. I had a tablet, which they turned on its side and then put it on this pole on wheels. Because, man, this story, I should really just talk about this for like 24-hour stream and just really break this down. But because they had to move me, I couldn't move, obviously, and they didn't want to get, the bed sores or what have you. So every 4 hours, I had to be like hoisted to one side to the other, back and forth, and stuff pillows under. So every time they did that, they shifted over the tablet. So I was watching Netflix. I like to say I watched all the Netflix during this time because I couldn't sleep and do all this stuff. But yeah, Monday through Friday, it was like every hour. It felt like high school, where it was a class or a thing every hour. So occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, because every system in my body shut down and had to be turned back on like a computer and then kind of rebuilt, breathing, circulatory, spinal cord, like all these things. So they had to work on each one of those every single day to just inch it back to where I was, or however my new life would be. I thought I was just going to go in for like 2 weeks, like it was like a broken bone or a cancer thing. And I've heard all these stories from other people where, yep, you got a major medical thing, and you go in, they fix you up, and like wrestlers, professional wrestlers, like, oh yeah, tore this muscle, I was in for 6 weeks, and now I'm back, off the top rope. I thought it was gonna be something like that. So yeah, it was crazy. Monday through Friday, every hour of the day was something that they were doing to me or to my body, or I had to work at. And then when that wasn't happening, I was trying to do the workouts. Even just lifting my arm up was a big success for the day of getting it, parallel and stuff. So I'm like, nope, I'm doing this. I'm going to do whatever they say plus extra. I'm going to go above and beyond. I've done that before in the Army and whatever. You can't just do the bare minimum. You have to do the bare minimum and then do your own thing as well if you want to get the results you want. So I went back to that military mindset and that decision-making process. And I didn't think it was going to be in this kind of situation, but it's like, you don't know where you're going to find yourself. So yeah, I get home October of 2021. And like I said, I'm a freaking vegetable. So I don't have this whole hospital system taking care of me and do all these little things. I have to do it nearly all for myself. And there was help along the way. I had a good support system, still tough. And it's a trauma on the rest of the friends and family. But slowly I was getting back. And then like I said, I'm just waiting for answers, responses, and didn't get anything. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to create my own path, do what they say, go to all these appointments. I'm still doing outpatient physical therapy, OT, speech, all that. But I'm like, okay, now I want to do more. Like, I'm going to push myself to do adaptive sports, whatever. And that helped because I was able to stretch myself, do this scuba diving. I went scuba diving later the next year, became certified at that. I didn't even know this was possible. It's called HSA, Handicap Scuba Certification Association, or something like that, where it's like, wow, that I'm like, I want to do this. They're like, if you want it bad enough, we can get you there with adaptive stuff. So I learned about scuba, golf. I've been getting into sit down skiing the past year or so, and that's been absolutely amazing. I never thought I'd be able to do all this stuff, but with the right kind of trainers, my own purpose in putting into it, and then adaptive equipment, which there's a lot out there, more so now than 20 or 30 years ago. Think about every conflict situation. Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump, he got the good legs, the space legs later on. Yep. So it's like, all right, I gotta get over my own whatever ego or limitations or what everyone's gonna think of me on video now. I got face paralysis still to this day. I don't look the way I do. I mean, now I'm like, maybe I'll grow out the beard and hide a little bit of the face paralysis, the eyes, my mouth doesn't move like it used to, but I just got to accept it and then kind of move on.
Well, I mean, you got those flowing locks, you got that gorgeous beard. I mean, I don't blame you, man.
You just got to lean into it.
You do.
Before you hopped on, I got on. I didn't have my hat on. I got the sun beaming down on me, and apparently I look like Randy Quaid. And so, at least you got that going for you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, no, it's been a wild ride. So yeah, that's the recovery. And then I wanted to get answers. So I started getting into podcasts, watching podcasts throughout this whole time because I didn't have anything else to do. And then some of them, they're like, okay, COVID policy are going away. We're doing meetups. Come join us over here at this event. And I'm like, I wonder if I can do this, navigate the airport and just make it like a military operation of plan resources, make it like an op order, but for my own thing. Because like I've traveled around the world, around the country. Like I know I can do this, or I know it used to be possible. Why can't it be possible this way? I had to lean on resource. I had to be in a power chair, for a good amount of time. But the VA gave it to me, gave me this chair. And I'm like, do I really need that? And I'm like, yeah, I do right now, but it doesn't have to be forever. I'm not just going to be in this chair forever. I'm going to keep, climbing out of it. And it did. So now I got these AFOs, ankle foot orthotics, carbon fiber. They wrap around from my knees, go around down under the sole of my foot. And so I can stand upright with those and a cane and all this stuff. And it doesn't look pretty, but it's what I need to feel like I'm alive and get out there and going back to, like I said, to do what I can so this doesn't happen to anybody else. Whatever's within my power to do that, I'm going to do it. So I start doing these speaking events and just asking like, what's possible? How do you do this? And then I started getting interviews and people interviewing me, and then like you guys. So I appreciate you throwing that invitation out there. And then I'm like, how can I get on all these shows? And it wasn't happening. So I'm like, what if I turned it around and be like, hey, can I interview you about this? And they're like, yeah, that's great. And then I'm learning about, audio and visual, and it's always a struggle, like we started, but I like learning. I'm a lifelong learner, and yeah, that's how I was able to kind of adapt and recover at this point.
So you do speaking engagements then? Like how does that work? How does somebody reach out to you about booking some kind of a speaking engagement?
Yeah, I'm working on that right now. Like I'm not a software tech guy website, so I'm working on creating a website, but I really probably X, Twitter is the best way to do it. When I heard Elon Musk was buying at X, where people said that would never happen, then he did. And it's like, okay, because yeah, I was getting censored on YouTube, on Meta, on Facebook, all this stuff. And then so it's like, I'm just sick of this. I don't want to fight just to be heard and all this stuff. So it's like, okay, they're like, okay, go over to X and share it. And I started doing these spaces, these Twitter X spaces. It's like, wow, this is amazing. I can just talk, and there's other people that have been through similar situations, similar symptoms to mine. Some have GBS, some don't, but it's a lot of the similar, the brain fog, the numbness, the tingling, the whatever I've been through. I'm like, okay, now I know this is really something, and it's got to be figured out. So let's talk about it. And so yeah, reach out to me on X. I'm getting more doing Twitter spaces, and then the whole nowadays. If I can talk about this right now, I got connected with React 19, so they helped the vaccine injured. Brianne Dressen is amazing. She was part of the Pfizer studies, the trials, during the way beginning of the stuff, like you started, Aaron, talking about that. So she was part of the original stuff, and then she got sick, similar to my symptoms and some other ones in her own experience. And then they booted her from the study. And then, so, it made it look like her case wasn't part of the statistics, but they kept like, and there's a documentary coming out called Follow the Silence. I saw it at the premiere at Santa Monica Film Festival. It won Best in Fest. And so that'll come out there, and you can see these doctors. And it was one of the guy, I can't remember his name right now. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but he just got departed from his position, and they were doing these Zoom calls, and they're like, yeah, we're going to help you out, and we're trying to figure this out. And really it was just leading her and other people on for years. And it's just, this information has to get out to everybody. And I'm just going to keep speaking, keep fighting until it does. And we can use some common sense. Like, it's not crazy. Yeah. There's my X. So, yeah, I just started talking and people wanted to hear it, and I started connecting with these people. These Dr. Molly James has been awesome. Shelly, she's in Florida. She's has military family, kids and stuff like that, and she's been through the worst of it. So she has a more chronic version of mine of GBS called if I mess this up, CIDP. It's a more chronic version. So yeah, she's been through the ringer too. I'm not going to share her story. She can do it. She's amazing and has done speaking engagements and stuff, and she's a fighter. But yeah, there's real people out there. It can't be ignored anymore. But now people are moving on to new news stories, and that's kind of how life goes. But yeah, I'm going to keep talking my story. I'm not saying any of the wrong things. I'm not trying to push one way or another. But yeah, I've been to DC, meeting with different Congress people, their teams. Yeah, it's pretty much just put me in the game, coach. Let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody go follow Drew at Drew Outstanding. Most importantly, go down to that other followed by. We've got a great conglomerate, a little network of folks that help get this stuff out there, from Chaplain America Corps to Drew to Vets Talking to all these folks over on his X. Make sure you're following him everywhere that you possibly can. Make sure to share his stuff. Make sure to get his story out there, because it's important that we don't talk about these things. We have to avoid problems in the future by having a real accounting, and I would even go as far to say as a reckoning of these things that we all went through. Drew, we always ask our guests for a little bit of advice. I'd like to put a little bit of a different spin on it, man. Man, you have overcome some insane things. You showed me videos of you doing the extreme sports and skiing on the biplane and then on the single plane of the ski. You refuse, even not at 100% back to where you were before this whole terrible thing happened. Man, your willingness, your grit, your determination, your unstoppability in order to get back to where you were, and at the same time speaking truth to power, if I can use that dumb phrase. You were literally one of the leaders out there telling this story and making sure that people understand it. So in the vein of giving some advice to people, exactly what it's like to be the only person in a room going, wait, this was wrong, and I'm going to tell my story about it. You've gotten all kinds of hate mail over it. People have resisted you from the very beginning. What advice would you give to people that feel like they're on their own, that feel like they are, the world has dealt them a bad hand and they don't think they can keep going?
Yeah, absolutely. For one, and I've been a peer mentor for veterans before. That's kind of how I guess I got into this, because before the incident happened, I had some experience working with veterans that had been through a lot more than me at the time, and now I've got my own issues and journey and stuff like that. But you're not alone. It's going to be your own story. It's going to suck. It's going to be very difficult. More than likely, if you're going through something like this, you've been through a difficult time before. This one's just going to be different. Connect with people along the way. And then, I wish I could put that all into a sentence, and some people do, but it's like the Rocky, the world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. He was positive before that, working with his son. Like it's going to be difficult, but it's worth it. And it's going to be difficult. It's going to be rewarding. But even like this podcast today, like I had one, real quick, I had one of the worst days relapses yesterday that I could think of. I was in bed for, basically 24 hours, nerve stuff, basically kind of once a year, all my symptoms, usually when it gets hot, humid, stuff like that, I just kind of collapse and all this stuff. But it's like, nope, you make commitments like this podcast with other things, and you gotta show up. So it's that show up, do what you can. It's not always gonna look pretty, beard all over the place, whatever. But and that, maybe that's the military thing. It's you can even look like shit, but show up and we'll get you in the right place. So spend your time with people that are willing to be there for you and get you in the right place.
Hell yeah, brother. Well, you got a whole team of people here. To all our listeners out there, make sure to follow Drew over at Drew Outstanding on X. Follow everything he's doing. Like it, share it, get it out to your friends. Ask them to like it and share it. This is how we avoid these problems in the future. Drew, thanks so much for coming on, man. We appreciate it. Thanks for everything you're doing. Hit me up in Vegas. We'll go find a different place, and maybe the scenery will be as good, and maybe the food will be even better than last time. So, Drew, thanks so much for following and coming on the podcast. Man, we appreciate you. Everybody else out there, train hard. We'll see you next time.